album rollout for Life of a Showgirl has felt like a trap, and as my favorite writer once said, if it feels like a trap, you're already in one. Everything that we have gotten from Taylor so far about this album has very much felt like the bait, and I am so eager to see what the switch is. How much is this album going to resemble what she promised? How much is it not going to resemble that? Because I think there's a pretty significant chance that it's going to be very different than what she has promised, what a lot of people have said. I've done a number of videos recently about how she is an unreliable narrator, how she admits she lies to us, how that we can prove that there are a number of lies in that podcast, and therefore everything that we have been told about this album so far, we should have a huge grain of salt, like not even just a grain of salt, Himalayan salt lamp level of grains of salt regarding this album, because I very much think at minimum, this is going to be an album where the songs sound like happy glitter gel pen songs, but like when you actually look at the lyrics, you realize that they're not nearly as happy as the song sounds. I think that is one of the big reasons why there is such a push to do this big theater experience where all of the most dedicated Swifties are going to be sitting there reading the lyrics as they listen to these songs. But also just, I think back to Taylor and how much she overthought the release of 1989, and specifically the cover of 1989, because she didn't want her facial expression to give away too much details about the song. But then she comes out and she has promised that this is going to be a glitter gel pen full album, but at the same time, every one of these covers has been more miserable and more contemptful than the one before. Like, these pictures do not present someone who looks happy at all, and I think especially because Taylor has said in the past that she puts a lot of thought into things, this is not going to be the happy album a lot of people think they're getting. I do think that there is a chance that parts of it, or that it might seem on the surface like it's happy glitter gel pen, but like maybe the lyrics are where you realize it's not. Or I also suspect that there may be something that happens to change the album between like the midnight and 1 a.m. or maybe the midnight and October 6th of it all. With the Midnight's album, we got additional tracks at 3 a.m. With TTPD, we got additional tracks at 2 a.m. I very much think that something is going to happen at 1 a.m. Again, like I've been saying in a lot of my videos, a lot of what Taylor seems to be doing is bringing our attention to the facades, to the artifice of it all, to the act of it all. Because I think what this album is actually going to be is a glimpse beyond the surface, right? Because it's not just Taylor. It's not just the pop stars of this era. Throughout history, the it girls of any era have had to have a separate persona that is commodified for sale to the public, and then who they actually were inside. Something that's really interesting about the October 3rd release of this, well, there's a lot of interesting things about the October 3rd release of this album, but one of the biggest is the fact that October 3rd was the day that Clara Bow was admitted into a mental asylum. And the reason that she was admitted is because when she entered Hollywood, she had a persona made for her, and that's the persona that she put on in the films, and that was the persona that she put on in interviews and out in public, and the things that the media would replicate about her. So she got to a certain age where she basically just broke down because she did not know who she actually was inside. Many of the artists who Taylor has been referencing either recently or seems to be referencing with this upcoming album are artists who had to have a persona that was commodified for sale. And some artists handle that well, but other artists like Clara Bow did not handle it well at all. Many people have had this ruin their lives. I think this is why, like, people like Amanda Bynes, I think that's why we have so many child stars that really struggle throughout most of their lives with mental health issues, with substance issues, all these problems that come from having to be something that they weren't for so many years, especially at that early formative part of their development. And Taylor is no exception to this. Taylor has concealed it better. Taylor and her team have really managed the PR around her image, so she doesn't have the headlines that people like Britney and like Justin Bieber are going through. But also, you really can see through a lot of her recent lyrics just how devastating the process of being Taylor Swift, the perfectly perfected pop star brand, but then also at the same time trying to figure out who she actually is, what she actually wants inside. But she can't just go out and experiment like most of us. Like, most of us go out and we make mistakes and we meet people and we date people and we learn about ourselves and we make choices based on those things that we develop. But if somebody else is making the persona for you, or even if you are making your celebrity persona for you, it can be very difficult to figure out who you actually are at the end of the day. And as a whole, the industry wants to act like child celebrities and women celebrities go off the rails because of personal faults, when in reality, the system is incredibly harmful and the industry does not care about the actual human lives behind it all any more than like their profits. They only care in as much as it hits their profits. If that person is no longer profitable for them, they will just happily let them fail. I've mentioned a ton of times on this channel that I read a lot of celebrity autobiographies, and I read a lot of stories about like what happened, why celebrities passed so young. Matthew Perry is a really good recent example of this, where as soon as he wasn't making like mad money for all of the people around him, all of his agents and managers and all of those figures, they kind of just let him go to the wild. And then once he was there, he was quickly identified by the harmful people that want to take advantage of the damaged addicts that Hollywood often produces. And it's hard enough to just overcome substance disorders. Like, it's even harder when you don't have anyone supporting you staying clean, staying sober, and everybody around you is like, hey, just take a little, just have a little. I can get you cheap. I just have a little, just once. Most of us have never had to be in that scenario. And because of that, like, most of us inherently cannot relate to the pressures that a lot of these people go through. And I've mentioned that Taylor, one of the things that she does is she uses relationships as metaphors for things in her life that we couldn't necessarily relate to. The biggest one being things like the master's heist, having the master stolen from her, having all of these things in life that changed outside of her control because other people were trying to hurt her or take advantage of her or profit off of her. We can't necessarily relate to that, and so very often Taylor uses metaphors. But more about Life of a Showgirl, the industry Taylor, all of those things in just a moment. My name is AerinMoriarty. I like doing videos about Taylor Swift, yes, but also pop culture, pop music, things that are influencing us, especially the things that many people don't look too highly on because it's women doing women stuff. I find that pop music is one of the artistic mediums that doesn't get nearly as much scrutiny or people investigating it, analyzing it, so I seek to fix that. I originally went to college for electronic media and film, but I dropped out because of the recession of 2007, 2008, and I went into the IT industry. I was at a definite disadvantage being a woman in that industry, so I decided very young that I was going to suppress down my gay urges and just pretend like men. So I have 20 years experience with bearding / lavender relationships / concealing your queerness and on putting on a persona, on being something that you're not in order to have a safer career, have more stability in life, achieve your goals, things of that nature. So if any of that interests you, I'm still a very small channel, so your likes, comments, and subscriptions really do help me out a lot. Back to TS12. So one thing that we really need to discuss that I don't see near enough people discussing is the fact that it is very likely near the end of her UMG contract. If not, this is going to be the final album of that contract. We don't know what the details of that contract was, but Taylor mentioned something of a 6-album deal with Big Machine, so I'm wondering if UMG also offered her a 6-album deal with like a asterisk for all of the Taylor's versions, which aren't technically new albums, but they aren't, you know what I'm discussing. But regardless, it would be very interesting if this is just the final album that concludes her contract with UMG, and then she is wholly either independent or able to sign a new contract or what have you, because we have seen other artists do like a short album just to finish off their contractual obligation, and then either later that night or the next day they released an album either on their own or with their new label, what have you, and then that was like their real album, and the first album was just like a throw off the last contractual obligation. And the reason I'm thinking that this may relate to Taylor is because of just how short this album is. Taylor is not really known for being succinct, for being able to get things done quickly. Taylor is known for having a lot of tracks, of often giving us even more tracks. Taylor does not have a problem writing tons and tons and tons of songs. But that's also another reason why I'm so skeptical about the fact that we won't get anything more from this album. And you know what? Maybe that in specific was the truth, and there isn't going to be any more of this album, but at 1 a.m. we are going to get an album of her own on her own label. Another suspicion that a lot of fans have had is that something is going to happen on October 18th of this year. And the reason people suspect that is because years ago, Taylor went to a castle where I believe there was some sort of raffle lottery thing going on, and she had to write down numbers, and the numbers that she wrote were 10, 18, 20, 25. And it's so very interesting to a lot of us that there's like not 13 or any of those numbers that we like think are her like lucky numbers. So that makes a lot of us believe that that is some date that is of particular sentiment. Like maybe that is the date that her contract is over. And if this isn't the the last album, and if that isn't the end date of her contract, I still very much think that she's got to be nearing the end of this. She has been with UMG for a long time, and like, yes, UMG has been very good for her, but I think one of the points that Taylor has been making by eschewing the traditional routes of album promotion and just doing her own thing on social media, on New Heights, all that jazz, is to prove to her label, to a lot of other figures in the industry, that there is nothing that they can offer her that she can't offer herself with the connections and with the power that she has. This album does make a lot more sense just from this angle of like, it is her last contractual obligation and she wants to get it done, and then she's going to release more stuff on her own or on a different label. I suspect it would be on her own because, again, like I just said, she doesn't really need the things that the industry can offer. And I think one of the things that Taylor is illustrating is just how she understands the attention economy, because if she does end up having her own label, it's very likely that she is going to try and get young talent underneath her label. And I think she could be really good at it. I think she could be really good at managing talent in a way that doesn't force them to give up their identities in order to succeed in the industry. But I do think, especially with Hayley Williams going out and making her own label, that that is something that Taylor is probably going to do. And even if it's just for her own music, I think it's beneficial for her to not have to have other companies' hands in her work, other people saying what she can and can't do. She finally has significant wealth that she can do whatever she wants artistically without needing other companies and their overhead and their contracts and all of that jazz. Now let's discuss the karma of it all. I'm just going to go over karma super briefly because there's tons of other people that have done videos on karma. Throughout a lot of Taylor's career, Taylor has been very consistent with constantly making music. She had been writing happier, more upbeat stuff with 1989, and everything in that era was looking great for her at first. But then the Kimye call happened and her reputation was ruined, and she had to pivot and make Reputation in response to all that. Now, especially when you're printing physical CDs and vinyls in massive quantities, it usually takes around 6 to 9 months between the recording of songs completion and those physical albums going for sale. So if Taylor was writing music at her usual pace, by the time 1989 released, there were probably a number of songs that were already written for TS6. And then there was another yearish before her reputation was ruined. She could have had a full album of material that just didn't meet the right tone to be on Reputation. And because of that, a number of fans suspect there's either parts or the entirety of a missing album from that time period. And there have been a couple of times that Taylor has hinted around that and used the word karma, so that's the tentative album name that we use most frequently, though some folks also believe it was supposed to be called Daylight. Taylor seems to use orange around karma a lot, so theorists have associated orange with that potential album, which is why the orange hues associated with TS12 have gotten so many of us so excited. I personally have genuinely gone back and forth over whether or not I believe this is karma, or if karma is just the Reputation vault tracks, or if TS12 is just the Reputation vault tracks. There's a number of things that could be going on here. And one thing that I'll say is that both the Reputation vault tracks and the concept of karma have been hyped up to the point where if Taylor said she was releasing either, I don't think they could possibly live up to expectations. But if Taylor is promising us something else and we get karma instead, that may limit the ability for people to overhype it up as karma in advance, which might allow it to be perceived more fairly. I don't know. Is this just going to be 12 tracks, or is there going to be something more? It's really unusual for Taylor to just release 12 songs and nothing more. I suppose there's the possibility that this album is a direct response to TTPD not winning as many awards and being perceived as sloppy and unedited by people who didn't try to actually understand it. I think if it's just these short 12 tracks, then it may be an attempt to prove them wrong. That said, I do kind of have a feeling that Taylor just doesn't care as much about awards as she once did. It could just be that she has a very specific point that she's trying to get across with this album, and she doesn't want there to be too much other distraction. But looking back, with the Midnight's release, we got extra tracks at 3 a.m., and with TTPD, we got the anthology at 2 a.m. And at this point, not everybody has realized that New Heights was riddled with lies, and I have personally thought that her saying it's going to be 12 tracks, there's not going to be any more, was going to be like the one like super provable lie that really started to make people think, wait, were the other things that Taylor was saying in this interview true, or were they lies too? The album resembling something completely different, or the album having more than 12 tracks, all of these are going to be super easily provable lies that are going to make people go back and look at New Heights through a different lens. And there's been a lot going on both with Taylor and with artists around her that I believe is them trying to make it more evident that when you consume digital content, it can be altered. We have this with the podcast that was originally an hour and 47 minutes long, then it glitched, and when it came back, it was over 2 hours long. We have this with the multiple endings for Sabrina Carpenter's recent music video. We also have this with the weird glitch that happened with Blank Space the other day, where multiple music providers had had the lyrics to another song entirely instead of the correct lyrics for Blank Space. And the song that was used was one that was about dynamite, and we've been talking about dynamite and Tavis and exploding and all of these things. It's like too on the nose for me to believe that it was just an AI glitch. Like, that's the most related to Taylor's art AI glitch that I could ever imagine. They have been trying to make people believe that these things are just glitches when they are part of the art, part of teaching people media literacy, part of teaching people that digital media that you consume can be changed at any time without you realizing it. And that, because of that, I very much suspect that something is going to happen to change the album. I wouldn't be surprised if the album was up for like an hour or two or a couple of days and then glitched and then it was a totally different album. I also have a couple of theories that there's going to be multiple versions of the album available the first day. We're going to discuss that in a second, but I think so much of what Taylor and the artists around her have been doing have been illustrating all of the ways that things can change. Things can be censored, things can be altered, things can be made different from the way you remember them. There has been so much of a push to purchase physical media for this album. Again, I personally think that, especially if you're one of the people that purchased early, that there may be some different physical media. I think it would be really interesting if different versions of the album come out at the same time and you don't realize it until people are arguing about what they think the album's about. On Bluesky a lot, we've been talking about the film Clue, that when it originally hit the theaters, there were 3 different endings and you didn't know going into the theater which ending you were going to get. And I think it would be very interesting, especially because so much of what Taylor has been trying to teach and so much of the stuff that we've been discussing here on my channel is about the way media perspective, media bias can warp the way things are perceived, things are presented to the audience. I think so much of what Taylor is doing is just trying to prove the fallibility of the mediums that we're using to get our art, to get our things. I think that the big push for this album to have so much physical media is because people really do need to be prioritizing physical media for things that they like. There's a battle going on right now over South Park and the rights of it, and a bunch of like, is this appropriate content anymore, and things of that nature. And because of that, at any given day, there may be 20 to 100 episodes of that show unavailable, if not the entire series in total. As the patriarchy takes over, gets more control, there is going to be a vested interest in people controlling Taylor's message and who can receive Taylor's message. I think Taylor has been able to stay in a lot of people's minds and a lot of people's households that are otherwise very conservative, very right-leaning, and Taylor is one of the few people that is not like Fox News or heavily propagandized voices in a lot of these people's heads. And Taylor's music is absolutely one of those things that I could see censored, that I could see suppressed, especially as things keep going the way they're going. So I think having different versions, having a change of this album, demonstrating the way that this album could be taken from people who are just accessing it electronically in the future, if that's something that she's doing, it sends a really powerful message about digital media and physical media and why physical media is so important in days like these. I also think physical media, it's a very ritualistic way to listen to music. Like, you're getting your albums out, you're deciding which one, you're thumbing through the covers, you smell that just, I don't know, I think albums smell really good, and then you're carefully putting it on the record player and then deciding the track, and then it's got that like warmth to it. I think so many albums, I think so many vinyls came out for this because Taylor recognizes both the benefit of owning that physical media and having control over that physical media, and also the benefits of having a ritualistic listening experience again, and having music be more than just something you just click a button and then you have it instantly accessible, because the ritual is part of it. And the album itself might not even need to change. It may just be something as simple as the album releases and fans make one conclusion about how they feel about the album, and then Taylor goes on Graham Norton and drops a piece of information that makes everybody rethink what they originally perceived about the album. It may be something like she explains it one way in some theaters and she explains it another way in other theaters. But like I said in one of my last videos, one of the things that Taylor is really good at is letting a small piece of information that can be taken a number of different ways come out, and letting both the fans and the media run with what they believe is the explanation for what's happening, and then a couple of days later, Taylor will allow additional information to come out to sort of correct the narrative if it's going in a direction she didn't intend for it to go. And it's interesting to me that she had a pre-order where people were basically asked to purchase the album completely sight unseen with no idea what it was about. And then you had the 4 knick-knack CD variant that was announced at the beginning of the podcast. And personally, I have wondered if Taylor was going to reward the fans who were willing to take the biggest chance on her some way. But because of those 4 different CD versions, I have wondered if there were going to be 4 different versions of this album. Life of a Showgirl, yes, but also Death, Afterlife, and Rebirth. It feels like it's just the beginning of more. And the more may possibly be what I was talking about a second ago, her having her own label, releasing music on her own. It feels like something that is hyped up to be very different than the expectations, because Taylor has been doing this for a while. She has been hyping up people in different ways and then subverting their expectations. It's like all of those nights at Eras Tour where she was signaling things that were making us think that she was going to announce Reputation, and then it was just Maroon as a surprise song again. She may let fans think that it's about her romantic relationships at first, only to say a couple of days later that it's about her relationship with the fans or the industry. She may act as though it's related to her personal struggles, when in reality it's related to the fact that most women that succeed on a high level in showbiz are putting on an act both on stage and off stage. And this is what I call my Schrodinger's album theory. My Schrodinger's album theory is that there are multiple versions of TS12, and that until you open the physical copy, until you damage the resale value by opening it and seeing what you have inside and listening to it, you won't know which version you have. We've been discussing Schrodinger's box with regards to Taylor a lot recently. Schrodinger's box is an example of a paradox wherein you cannot know whether or not the cat is alive or dead until it is observed. And so Schrodinger referred to the cat being both alive and dead until such point of it being observed. It was a paradox that illustrated how silly the concept was. Something cannot be both alive and dead. But I think it would be really interesting if there were multiple versions of the album and people wouldn't know which version of the album they'd received until they opened the packaging of the album. Taylor has been making so many statements since Reputation about how you know things happen if you didn't observe them versus how do you know the things that you were observing are being observed correctly. And one example of Taylor playing around with this theme is the entrance to Arrowhead Stadium a couple of weeks ago, where we couldn't glimpse her behind the partition, but also while that was all occurring, you had the media simultaneously saying Taylor was and wasn't at the game, and the media who believed she wasn't at the game all had reasons for why. Taylor has been playing this big game with the media where things happen and she just lets them go wild speculating so that people realize how wild the speculation is. I very much think something to that level is going to happen with his album again. I think Taylor could be doing a number of really interesting things with her art in order to continue to play with these themes in this album. So let's discuss some of the things that I think that we're definitely going to see in this album. I think we're going to see a love song that is only romantic if you don't read too far in it, like So High School. That song is not romantic. It seems kind of satiric, or it seems like it's making fun of things. As a millennial, if I say something is so high school, that is not a compliment, that is a criticism. I also think that we're going to see references to a number of historical women in Hollywood. Obviously we have Elizabeth Taylor, but I think Wood is going to bring Natalie Wood into things as well, because her life and her passing are both really interesting in the context of a lot of things that we've discussed here. I have frequently connected Into the Woods to Taylor's work. Into the Woods is basically an example of what happens after Happily Ever After, and it demonstrates how Happily Ever After is very seldom happy, and that the relationships that they enter into aren't maybe necessarily as wholesome as what they once seemed. So I very much think that we could see a theme of Happily Ever After not actually being that happy, or something that subverts the Happily Ever After notion. I also think that we're going to see homophones and homographs. I've been discussing those a lot recently. Words that sound the same and have different meanings, words that are spelled the same and have different meanings. Fans, especially, both fans as in cool yourself and fans as in the people that support you. There are so many words that Taylor has been using in multiple ways, and I think that that's going to be at play in this album. Engagement, I think, could be a very big one. We've been talking about engagement being the ring on her finger, engagement being the people that are paying attention to her. So let's discuss the tracks. I have not thought about the tracks too much because I'm just not entirely convinced that the track list that we have is the album that we're going to see. But I do have some basic thoughts that I want to go over because I'm sure people are going to be curious. The fate of Ophelia. Was she pushed or did she fall? Did she have agency after all? There are so many interesting things to discuss about Ophelia. She is very often trivialized down to a one-dimensional character. She's very often trivialized down to just an example of the harm happening around Hamlet, when in reality she's a character with motivations and feelings all of her own. A lot of times when Taylor uses a character heavily in her work, it is because she knows a lot of her fans are going to go research that character, or going to learn more about that character, and a lot of times they're characters and figures that have been simplified down to one-dimensional, that their own thoughts and feelings and desires have been lost, and a lot of times the thing that remains is the persona, the image. A good example of that is Clara Bow. I thought I knew a lot about Clara Bow until Taylor came along, but I researched her more and realized, oh, like, all I knew was about Clara Bow's career. All I knew was about Clara Bow's persona. I didn't know who she actually was. I can very much see Taylor kind of comparing herself to Ophelia in much the same way that she did to Cassandra, and I think obviously that cover where she's up to her chin in water, that very much suggests a drowning. We've made the connections not only to Ophelia, but also to Whitney Houston. The fact that many people around Whitney Houston believe that Whitney Houston would still be alive today if her girlfriend was able to have stayed in her life, if she wouldn't have felt pressured to be with men in order to be the most successful singer that she could possibly be, this sadly is just something that we come across so frequently. And I think regardless of why Taylor is using Ophelia in this song, it is good that she has more people investigating that character, digging deep into that character. Because I think that there's a lot of pressure right now from like the kind of trad wife sector of things to place all of your hopes and safety and security in the hands of a man, and that very seldom works out for women in the way that they hope it is going to work out. There's a reason the trope of fridging the wife or fridging the woman exists. Like, very often female characters exist just to be one-note narratives in a man's story, but in a lot of media, female characters are not like truly developed three-dimensional characters. They're one-dimensional, they're one-note, they just exist to be a part in that man's story. And because of that, I think that makes a lot of young girls and young women feel like they need to be just a footnote in a man's story and not the main character themselves. Something I've discussed in my performance artler videos is how whenever Taylor is with a man, people get more excited about her performing domesticity than they do over anything that she achieves in her career, no matter how great it is. If even Taylor Swift is subject to that mentality, then most women— I went to all-girls Catholic high school. I know a lot of women who got married to men, and just seeing so many of the brightest, most accomplished, most interesting women that I know just downgrade themselves to his partner and the mommy of his children is very harmful. It has been very hard to see. And that's a great segue into Elizabeth Taylor, right? Because Elizabeth Taylor, she had PR relationships. She had relationships that were engineered from the studio in order to tell a specific narrative and to keep a man safe, and keep a man's reputation safe. She's also noteworthy because she had a public persona. She spoke about her public persona and how the fact that, like, what a lot of people think about her is not actually the truth about her. She was in situations where she would have loud arguments with Richard Burton in hotel rooms when she knew there was media people around, because she knew that the fans were more interested in the tawdry details of her love affair than they were of the things that she was achieving artistically in the movies that she was in. But the thing is, people were so interested in those details about her relationships, especially because a lot of times she was in relationships with people that she co-starred in films with, and that made people want to see those films. And that made people want to see the films where she was acting with other guys as well, just to see, okay, is the chemistry as real with these other guys as it is with these men that she's married to. Elizabeth Taylor is such an interesting figure. She is one of the ones who managed to figure out how to not have the persona, the system, all of these things that are heavy weights over a young actress's head, how to not let them destroy her, how to not let them crush her. She still was able to be herself, to be happy, to find a sense of peace. Her, Marlene Dietrich, Katharine Hepburn, these are all women that Taylor clearly looks up to because they managed to have extended careers. They managed to not just be a flash in the pan. They managed to still get work even when they were over 35 and the industry had a declining level of interest in them because men are scared of powerful, experienced women. So I definitely think that Elizabeth Taylor, the song, is A, to get people investigating her, reading the books that Taylor read about her, to understand how the industry has always worked with regards to PR relationships, showmances, things of that nature. But also, I'm really curious in the song itself what aspect of Elizabeth Taylor's life and persona she is going to focus on, or if it's going to be a combination of both, or if she's going to make the comparison. I think about the ring that Kelly Taylor gave her, and Taylor said, "This makes me feel like Elizabeth Taylor." Which is a good segue into Opalite, right? Because opal is not opalite. Opalite is a fake thing that is made by man to resemble opal. But I think at a time when we're discussing what is real, what is not real, what is man-made, what is Taylor's true interest and ambition, and what is she putting into this, Opalite is such an interesting comparison to make. And I wonder if in this song we see Taylor relate herself, Taylor Swift the brand, to being Opalite, with herself underneath being an opal. So father figure, proving that Taylor does pay attention to trends on the internet, for one. But also so many of us are hoping that either George Michael is going to be on the song or it's going to be very heavily inspired by father figure. Seeing Taylor consistently put herself in a man position, in a male role. This is something that she's been doing since Lover. She had the man, she has herself as James, she has the chairman, and then father figure. So personally, if this is just her covering it, I would love that. That would be perfect to me. But I do think it would also be interesting if she kind of has a view of the fans and her relationship with the fans as her being our father figure. I think that could be very cool. Now let's discuss Eldest Daughter. This is so interesting to me because all of the artists around Taylor have had some song that centers around being an eldest daughter recently. I discussed Lords very recently, but a number of artists are exploring this concept creatively, which I love. I think a lot of these artists who are eldest daughters themselves have a lot of fans that are eldest daughters, but I do think that a part of this is going to be like being in a business relationship with your parents is weird, especially if that is a business relationship that started when you were a kid. I think about just some of the conflict that we saw. Whoops. I think back about some of the conflict that we saw in Miss Americana between Taylor and her father. And I absolutely think that her parents love her. I absolutely think that her parents have good intentions for her for the most part. But also I kind of get the vibe that they were helicopter parents, and having helicopter parents, it can prevent you from fully being the person that you want to be because they want you to be the best possible version of yourself. Like that, the best possible version of me is not a person that I want to be. Like I tried to pursue that for 20 years because I really didn't want to let my parents down. So I can only assume that even if her parents have a great relationship, a perfect relationship, which I have doubts, that they still butt heads at times, that there's still times when what they want for her and what she wants for herself are different. And it's obviously the whole family has their finances wrapped up in Taylor Swift the business. Like her whole family is Taylor Swift the brand. That has just got to be weird from like every angle. And I assume that we are going to get some kind of exploration of like when your parents love you and they're trying their best, but sometimes, and then the other thing is like millennials, our parents were learning from books and from the people around them. Like our parents didn't have comprehensive parenting guides the way kids do now. Our parents tried to do their best, I'm sure, but I'm also sure that there were times that they probably didn't necessarily discipline her in a way that she liked, or that they were disciplining her for things that were just parts of her personality, or they were trying to train away parts of her personality. I wager that there are any number of problems that exist from just the way millennials' parents were taught to parent us. Like, even if they were trying 100% to be the best possible parents in the world, they weren't working with the best possible material. Ruin the Friendship. I very much think that this is going to be a song about having a friend that you have feelings for and taking things to the next level, and then it didn't work out, and then you're like, crap, I've ruined this friendship. I don't think that it's about Blake Lively in any way, shape, or form. I think a lot of people are going to think it's about Blake Lively. I don't really think that. I don't know who it's about, but I wager it is about the very relatable sapphic experience of taking your friendship to the next level and then it not working out and you not having a friend or a partner anymore. Actually Romantic. I think this song is going to be satire. I think it is going to be bold-faced satire. I think she is going to say actually romantic, and she is going to describe things that are bare minimum base level. This is the bar on the floor. This is not, romantic. And I think a lot of people aren't going to realize that until it's pointed out. That's my theory for that song. And if I'm right, I am going to be so excited. Wishlist! I think Wishlist is going to be our PR relationship slash bearding song. I also include Blank Space, Ready for It, and Cowboy Like Me as bearding songs. There's probably other ones, but those are the three that are sticking out. Those are the three that I call the bearding trilogy, and I keep meaning on like going into. One of these days, she will stop giving me new stuff to talk about, and I can talk about old stuff again, but I don't know when that day will be. When I get an editor. But yes, I think it is very much going to be about how being in the relationships pays her bills. Would! I think Taylor is going to give people the impression that this is a pretty romantic song about her and Travi, and then it's actually going to be a song about Natalie Wood and her passing being really suspicious. Cancelled! Exclamation point. The only other song that Taylor has done that is in full caps that has an exclamation point at the end is Me. If you've been here a while, if you saw my video on Failed coming out in 2019, you already know. A lot of us believe that Me was supposed to be the first part of her coming out of the closet. This was something that was thwarted by the Masters heist. Taylor realizing that if she came out of the closet, she would lose a lot of her audience, and if she lost a lot of her audience, that she wasn't going to be able to make enough money to pay to get her rights back, which is the thing that she wants more than anything in the world. Me was supposed to be one of the most happy defining moments of her career when she was finally able to come out and be herself and not be, subject to morality clauses or whatever it was that was holding her back. We also see discussion of that moment where she chose not to come out of the closet in LOML, Loss of My Life. Coward claimed he was a lie. Such a valiant roar, what a bland goodbye. I think Cancelled is going to be about the way she personally felt when she canceled her coming out, but also because she was acting so gay at the beginning of Lover, and then that didn't ever go anywhere, she was accused of queer baiting. So it wasn't just that she couldn't come out of the closet, it wasn't just that she hoped she could communicate to her fans that she was queer without like fully coming out, and then a lot of her fans didn't. They did the very opposite thing. I think Cancelled is going to be very sad. I think the media is going to try and twist it into her, overreacting over Kim Ye call and Reputation era and things of that nature, but I very much think that this is related to Me. I think Me was very formative. Me was supposed to be like one of the first songs that was like explicitly about her, who she really was, who she actually was, and it wasn't just that she couldn't come out, it wasn't just the failed coming out, it was also the fact that that song was laughed at. A lot of people don't like that song, a lot of people don't like Me and You Need to Come Down, even though those were clearly two of Taylor's favorite songs. They were clearly two songs that were incredibly important to Taylor, and it really shows that every time Taylor shows herself, expresses herself and says, this is me, this is what I feel, those things get mocked. And you really see after that point, Taylor posits herself more in the masculine. She invents James. James is an insert for her. She has the chairman. She is a lot of the male pronouns in a lot of her new songs. Next up is Honey. I do think that Honey is going to present itself as being a love song, as being romantic. I think it may reference the scene where Travis is in Honey in that movie. What is it? Happy Gilmore 2? But I think what it's actually going to be about is Taylor and her relationship with the fans, how Taylor gives them a little bit of honey and then ants and flies alike just come and they sample that honey. That way that little tidbits of her relationship, little glimpses of her and Travi can get people coming quicker than anything. Finally, The Life of a Showgirl with Sabrina Carpenter. I've said before that Sabrina Carpenter is doing very similar things to what Taylor's doing in using her work to teach media literacy, to teach people how to pay more attention to the things that they consume. I think that this song is going to be about how women throughout history, to succeed at a high level in showbiz, have had to put on a persona. And that persona is very different from who they are inside. Because the thing is, in showbiz, a lot of times women are not fairly compensated compared to men, especially once they hit a certain age. Taylor's very lucky to have succeeded in pop as long as she has, but I think very quickly she is going to release a point where people are like, why is a 40-year-old woman making pop music? Even people like Madonna, once they hit 35, 40, the amount of money that they break in is significantly less. I also have a theory with this album that is actually meant to be listened to in reverse order, and that the story that it tells may be more comprehensive in that order, so I'm curious to see if that plays out as well. But anyhow, I have been AerinMoriarty. In addition to talking about Taylor Swift, I talk about other pop artists, pop music, things that are influencing us, things of that nature. I also give commentary on life and the world around me as somebody with EDS and ADHD. If any of that interests you, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because it does help my channel out so very much. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I am so excited for this album.